the number of times that he said that he added said the word unity and togetherness in his entire speech. I mean, that's what stood out for me.
See, as far as the Biden speech was concerned, uh, what was remarkable for me as an Indian or as a global citizen, if you will, was that he virtually did not speak anything about foreign policy or the rest of the world. I think the focus was primarily domestic.
Absolutely.
Priorities were very clear. It was firstly the virus. I think virus and unity were the two underlying themes of his entire address, and perhaps unity even more than the virus.
Virus,
But
yeah.
and I frankly I couldn't help notice exactly what you just said, that the number of times he used the word unity almost sounded like a third world leader speech, because it's in countries like India and other places where this is a constant theme that we must be
But,
united.
but you can't really blame him given the scenes that unfolded on
No, no,
Capitol, on the
I
US
no,
Capitol on the 6th of January this year. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, I agree with you. See, maybe people like us in India, in fact, not for many years now, but maybe in countries like ours, we take these things in our stride. It's something quite novel for the Americans. What happened just a couple of weeks back, and frankly, it was a bit of a scary scene what was happening out there. But having said that, I think the fact that he was repeating unity so many times tells you how broken America is in at least politically, how divided the country is politically, and how much will have to be done to actually start, mending the kind of divisions which exist in the American polity and in the American society. I don't think anybody could have taken any exception to the words which President Biden used, but actually delivering on those words and actually trying to bring people together, I don't think is going to be very easy, because while he might want to try and he might actually be sincere in wanting to doing that, there are many people uh, in his own ranks who are very unforgiving, who are wanting to bay for blood, who will be extremely vindictive and vicious towards the opposition. The kind of language which is used to address people with whom you don't agree. And while it was all very well for President Biden to say that we have to hear people, we have to see people, we have to listen to them and respect them. Frankly, I don't think any of these things were happening, not just from the right but also from the left. Uh, and that was, for somebody who has always admired American society, American polity, the kind of freedoms which exist out there, the absolutism with which freedom of speech is allowed, to see people being shut down, to see expression being constricted, and to actually start demonizing the other for certain views which they held. Of course, and not everybody who was being demonized held extremist views, but anything which you don't agree with, and we see that increasingly in India, Aditi, that you don't agree with somebody, so you start attaching labels to them, you start attaching very base motives to those people, and I think those challenges are going to be far more difficult to surmount than anything else. So yes, the virus will come and the virus will go. Its ravages will stay, both physical as well as economic. But how do you address the virus which has afflicted the body politic? And I think that is going to be his real challenge. If he can manage to deliver on that, I think everything else will fall in place. Just one last point, I don't really envy President Biden. I think he has, in some ways, he has the toughest job any American president has had, because normally American presidents, whether we like it or not, were seen to be the people who had to keep the world together. Here is a guy who doesn't only have to keep the world together, but he has to keep America together. So I think he has a lot more on his plate, and whether he will have the bandwidth to deliver on that, I think that is what is really the million-dollar question for me.
Or will you have the bandwidth to deliver on that? That one, and your point about unity being the underlying factor. Let me start with there, and then I just want to take that question to Pramit and Rizal also. The scenes that unfolded on the Capitol. That of course was probably why the entire emphasis seems of Biden seems to be on domestic politics, as Sushant pointed out. Do you really, I was speaking to the former ambassador to the United States, Arun Singh, a while ago, and he said that remember that 75 to 80 million Americans voted for Trump and they support Trump and what he stood for, and therefore the divisions in the American socio-political fabric right now are at a really high, uh, uh, are at an all-time high, even worse than when Trump came in 2016. So, Pramit, my question to you is: do you think that's like a tall order, as Sushant seems to think, for Biden to resolve going forward? And because that is really going to be his first task, to unite the country, the togetherness, because they're facing adversities from really every angle, from the pandemic, the economic front, and everywhere else.
Yes, it's going to be difficult because the divisions, in particular the economic inequality, that I would argue underlies the present problems in the United States. So, inequality that has become racialized over time. Is something that began in the 1980s. We saw the figures drop for white working class, their incomes, the destruction of their jobs, livelihoods, and then slowly their sort of collapse into drugs, and a political narrative, a very poisonous political narrative that they blamed not only their white elite
Right.
brethren, but all minorities and immigrants and so on, and now has metastasized into a particularly poisonous narrative in which they basically don't believe anything their own government says. They don't believe their own electoral system. They have these bizarre conspiracy theories like QAnon, and so on, which have now gripped their minds. And their division is so strong they no longer listen to the same television stations. They no longer read the same newspapers. Now, I would suspect they will no longer even share the same social media platforms. So this division is something that goes back over, has been developing for 30, 40 years. So you can't expect Biden to resolve this in 2 to 4 years. The only hope that what we can hope that he will accomplish, he'll lay the basis for a consensus within the American establishment that this has to be resolved, that these are not just kooky people who should be just put in jail and forgotten, but there's a far larger social problem that has to be resolved, and that over the next 10, 20, whatever years, generation, they'll dedicate themselves to resolving that. And second, he has to resume at least some form of economic activity for this class, a sense that at least their government is trying to resolve this problem, and give some economic
Right.
relief to them. And at least that hopefully will ensure that a degree of social violence within the country will at least be reduced.